Hi there, and welcome to my conversation, my little chat for today. Um, I want to talk to you all today about how we get in our own way when we're in development. And remember, no matter how well developed we become, there is always room for advancement, more understanding, fine honing of abilities. And what's prompted this for me is somebody was asking me about, how scary is it going live, um, how nerve-wracking it is, things like that. And I said, yeah, it is. It's really scary, but for me, I'm one of the stage fright people. I am the same regardless of whether I'm working in front of a camera, whether I'm working with people on a one-to-one, in a teaching setting or in a demonstrating setting. I'm the same regardless. And it's not because I think that spirit are going to let me down. I'm more concerned that I'm going to let people down and that I'm going to let spirit down. And I think a little bit of healthy nervousness is a good thing because it stops you from getting in your own way. It stops you from thinking, I can do this, I'm brilliant, this works all the time, I'm fantastic. And, for the most part, for a lot of us, it does work. But we come away from it and we critique ourselves. And that's how we learn and that's how we grow and progress because we think, well, maybe I missed this, maybe I missed that. And as we were having this discussion, this lady said to me, but you're concerned that you might not look professional, that because you're doing it from your own office, you haven't got fancy screens up and lighting and all of this. And I said, listen, um, unless you were to put me on a Hollywood film set with all of the equipment it takes to make a blockbuster, you're not going to get me to be much different to what I am now, because the whole idea is that we are who we are and we work naturally. And it's really important that you remember that. So it made me think, how are we perceived? Are we not going to move forward because we don't look right yet, because we don't sound right yet? And we're going to allow these things to stop us from going forward. Well, as I say, unless you've got me a whole team of Hollywood blockbuster type people, you're never going to make me look like a newsreader, because that's not who I am. I am the person sitting here in front of you that isn't changing my accent, because I'm proud of my roots and my accent tells you where I come from. Um, and that's my roots. My roots is in a very natural, very down to earth, um, normal, if you can say that, type of world. Um, I don't have fancy airs and graces, and if I tried to talk really posh, you would just laugh at me anyway because it would sound ridiculous. So it made me think a little bit more about how often do we hold up our development because we've got preconceived ideas about what it should be. And by that I mean people who have decided they want to work with a certain ability, whether that may be their primary ability or not. I mean, I remember years ago, I've always termed myself as a clairsentient medium, and in those days that used to mean you work from your sensitivity and the sensations that you got. And I used to say, I am not visual, I do not see spirit, I am not describing them as though I'm looking at a photograph. I am working with the sensitivities that I have, and that helps me create the picture, the descriptor, for you to understand who I'm working with. But I used to look at people who were clairvoyant, who did see spirit, right, whether it was internally or, subjective or objective, and I used to be really envious. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, I used to think, oh, I wish I could do that. Oh, God, do I wish I could do that. But it never stopped me from working in the way that I did, because I understood even at that early age, just keep going, because your mediumship unfolds. So how it is at the very beginning may not be how it becomes later on. We start from one place and we move forward. And yet I am aware and have met people who in 20 years haven't moved any further forward, because instead of working with what was unfolding, they were adamant they weren't doing anything until they got the gift they wanted. Well, you know, we use the word gift and I use it loosely. But how sad that somebody is willing to block their own development because it doesn't look like it should to them. Because it doesn't fit into the box that they have created. And I think that, you know, we have to be realistic and we have to be honest in our work with the spirit. You know, people say, oh, I don't meditate because this, because that, because that. Well, that's fine. You don't have to go into deep meditations if you don't want to. But you have to find what works for you, which enables that stillness, that energy, so that you and spirit can blend together to aid your development. So a lot of what we come across is people's perceptions of what it ought to be rather than what it is. And it's a bit like buying something offline and not reading the measurements. So when it arrives, instead of being this wonderful huge thing that you think it's going to be for your $50 or £50 or whatever it may be, it turns out to be only 6 or 7 inches high instead of the 3 foot you thought it was going to be. So you've given yourself a disappointment, and you've done that because you haven't read all of the fine details. So instead of looking at our abilities and our development as in, I need to let my mediumship unfold as it should, you've put blocks in your way, because you've said, my mediumship will unfold in clairvoyance. Well, do you know what? I still very rarely, after over 30 years, see when I'm working. I do see sometimes when I'm not working, when I'm busy with other things and not even thinking about spiritual things. I often get a flash of somebody there, and then I'll stop and I'll speak to them, and it will be people that are my people. When I'm actually working with clients or demonstrating or whatever, I very rarely get a visionary aspect, very rarely. And I think that's because the way I work, it seems to be quite quick, and I wouldn't have the time to process the imagery because it's not my primary gift. Now, in development, I could sit and develop that and fine-hone it and make it stronger. But I just feel that, you know, I'm doing the best that I'm able. I am unfolding in a natural way. I am not forcing it. And if it means in another 20 years, by which point I'll be very old and grumpy by right, then so be it. If that's how long it takes, then so be it. I work in the way that I'm directed by spirit. The way that my guides are able to communicate with me in the most effective and loving way possible. Because at the end of the day, what matters really is the message that we are delivering, the conversation, the communication between the two worlds. That's what we're delivering. We're not delivering a my gift is better than your gift routine. So we need to dispel a few myths, really. There is no right or wrong in an ability. There is only issues with the way that we develop and use it. And that might sound like quite a harsh statement to make, and I don't mean it to be harsh in that sense. But stop putting things in your way. Because, do you know, if I were to wait until the moment I could do a live, a slick, like I'm in a newsroom, then you would be waiting forever and I would never be on here. Never. Because it would never be right. There would be always something that I would say, that's not right, that's not right, that's not right. There would always be a reason to stop this natural process. And it's the same with our mediumship. You know, somebody who works with the elements of colour and works through the elements of colour isn't doing it any worse than any other form of mediumship. It's their form of mediumship. And remember, mediumship is the communication between the two worlds. I'm not talking about psychic energy here. I'm talking about the communication through spirits. You know, there are some beautiful artists that work with colour, creating imagery. And as you know, my dear friend Shirley Ann, who I've worked with for many years and known for many years as a close friend, has a wonderful way of representing both not only in colour but also in charcoal. But they work through the shapes and shades, etc., to deliver their form of mediumship. So, if you were that type of person, would you say, well, you know, I'm not a Michelangelo, so I can't do psychic art? Well, that would be wrong, wouldn't it? That would be wrong. You would be not only doing yourself a disservice, but you would be doing spirit a disservice. Work with what you have. Expand it, grow with it, fine-hone it, and allow it to manifest into what it's going to be. The most important thing is that closeness with spirit. You know, we're creating a link between two worlds. We don't go in and say, right, talk to me. Because do you know what, if you knocked at my door and demanded I talk to you, I'll be closing the door in your face. Basically. Because that's what effectively you're doing. As a stranger, you'd be, talk to me now. Well, that's not going to get a response from anybody. You know, we have to make friends with our communicators and with our guides. Our guides know us so well, and we have to be able to allow them to nurture and work with us to make that stronger and more effective as a channel. So just because you've decided that you want to be a particular type of medium doesn't mean to say it's the right type of medium for you at this moment. The whole world is our training ground. The whole world. Every aspect of our lives can be used within our mediumship. Every lesson that we learn in life, every experience that we have, we use all of that as we are developing and as we are working with spirit. Don't limit it. You know, stop saying, somebody told me a long time ago that I would be clairaudient, that I would hear spirit people. Well, I never hear anything. So, obviously I'm not a medium. Now, what that means is obviously you might not understand what it means to actually be clairaudient. You might not understand that you're not going to hear a physical human voice like we hear now. If you're really lucky, you will hear the voices objectively. But for most of us, it's a thought voice. It's the voice that we have inside that we can quite happily have a conversation with. And yet to outsiders, they might think you're talking to yourself. Well, we're back to the perception of, aren't we? Does it really matter what other people think we are doing? Does it matter what they perceive it to be? Is that more important than developing your mediumship? Is that more important than the way you approach your work with the spirit and the way you allow it to work for you and with you? You know, far too often in this world we are guided by those who actually have no reason to have an opinion about what we're doing. And I'm not saying other people's opinions don't matter, because of course people's opinions matter to us. But should we be letting them stop us from doing what we do? I know if I'd listened to people in the early days, I would have given up long ago. I wouldn't have got past the first 2 hurdles, I don't think. But I decided that if these people, these personalities that we call guides, if they have felt it was important enough to contact me, to reach out to me, and to be willing to show me and teach me and work with me, then that mattered. That mattered more than Joe Bloggs down the street or the people at the supermarket. What matters is how you feel about your work. What matters is the honest work with your guides. And by that, I am not talking about the wonderful old statement, my guide says. Because do you know what? When I hear my guide says, what I actually hear most of the time is, this is coming from me, but I can't blame myself, I have to blame somebody else. You know, many moons ago, I met a lady at a place where I was doing some training, and was on a workshop week, and this lady sat at the dinner table and she said, oh, it's cabbage, I can't eat cabbage. So I just thought, well, maybe she's got an aversion to it, or it does something to her, or whatever. And then it was like, oh, and potato, and it's mashed potato. I can't eat mashed potato, and certainly not with cabbage. And I said, oh, right, you know, is there some reason for that? Expecting her to say she had IBS, or she, oh no, my guide says I can't eat that. Well, I'm sorry, but I've never met a guide anywhere that picked your menu for you when you went for something to eat. And I think they've got far better things to do than that. But that is the level at which people will take on this mantle that my guide says I can't do that, my guide says I can't do that, my guide says I've got to do it like this, I've got to do it like that. And they aren't. Because you know what? If you're communicating with them that clearly at that point, then your development should have stepped on and on and on. Because even now, no matter how close our connections get with my wonderful team of workers, I still have to, oftentimes, work out how they're trying to say something to me. I have to interpret it to deliver. I have to make sense of it in my humanness. Because although my spirit is alive and well within me, so is my human brain, so are my human emotions, and I have to work with all of those things. So, quite thankfully for me, you know, my beautiful guide is not telling me what I can and can't eat, which is probably just as well, because he would be bald by now, because of all the things I do eat that I'm not supposed to eat. But that's me, that's the way I am. I make the choice of what I'm going to eat today, and so should you. Just the same as we make the choice of whether we are willing to develop in our entirety, or whether we're going to decide we only want to do one thing, and that's all we're going to do. You know, and I'm just going to touch briefly on what for some is a very difficult subject to discuss, and it's not one I particularly want to delve very deep into. But I have been made aware of somebody recently who has decided, because they've watched a lot of things on TV, that being an exorcist and such things is really, really, really exciting stuff, and it's fabulous, and you get to go and shout at them all and cast them out and do this and do that. Well, I wouldn't thank you for that. I really wouldn't. I don't even want to go there. But this lady has a wonderful, wonderful gift. And she has decided that she wants to step onto this pathway that takes years and years and years of training, specialist training, for those who really choose to do it correctly. out with anything of a spiritual nature, you are dealing with people who are mentally under a great deal of stress and emotionally under a great deal of stress. So why would you think it's alright to go in, crash, bang, wallop, throw a bit of salt about, yell at things and leave? What about that is mediumship? I don't know, because it's not my version of mediumship. The work that we do with spirit is done with love, it's done with gentleness, and it's done with strength. And that strength comes in how we work with people, how we treat people, and how we understand the subtle dynamics that work between the two worlds. I don't look for dark things, I don't look for anger. I look to see how I can better a situation. And I would hope that most people that cross my path, if not all of them, would be the same. So, be careful how you think about your mediumship and where you want it to go. If there's things you're not understanding, if you feel it's time for a new teacher, seek out one. There is the old saying, when the student's ready, the teacher appears, and often that's the case, and it's often not the person you might have thought it was. It's surprising where we learn our lessons from. Think very carefully before you get in your own way. Think carefully before you restrict your mediumship, because that is effectively what you're doing. If you decide you need to be this type of a medium, then you are restricting your development and restricting your mediumship. Let it unfold in a beautiful and natural way. Work in the light, fill your own being with that loving light and healing, because this work is a healing work. We can bring solace, we can bring understanding, we can bring loving memories and laughter and joy and relief and support. And that's what we should be doing. That's where our focus needs to be, on what we can do to bring light. It's not a drama. It doesn't have to be a drama. And it shouldn't be a drama. So I will leave you with those thoughts today. Please be aware that you are the master of this destiny on this physical earth. Be careful about closing doors or refusing to open them in the first place because they're not painted the colour you thought they should be.